Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Je m'appelle Alice Werba. J'ai étudié français ici almost 40 years ago. So it's my great pleasure to welcome everyone. I am very honored to be the visitor to ceremonies this evening. And so I know that we'd like to be able to get started. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Isabelle Laroux of the Alliance Française in Los Angeles and the Honorable Mem Biden. Is that close?
Cher consul généraux, chers consuls honoraires, chers vice-consuls, chers délégués, mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, merci d'avoir répondu si nombreux à notre invitation. Cet événement, nous l'avons pensé et organisé en partenariat avec Mme Mbaye, consul honoraire du Sénégal. J'ai le plaisir et l'honneur d'ouvrir cette conférence sur le thème de la francophonie. Vous représentez ici ce soir la francophonie dans toute sa diversité et sa richesse. Nous célébrons le mois de la francophonie en mars, la semaine de la francophonie la semaine prochaine, la journée de la francophonie le 20 mars. Mais nous, à l'Alliance française de Los Angeles, la francophonie s'invite tous les jours. Faire résonner notre langue et faire rayonner notre culture reste notre quotidien. Le français est une langue de culture et de dialogue. La langue française est porteuse de valeurs de démocratie, de tolérance et de respect de l'autre. Sans citer de chiffres, je laisse le soin à nos panélistes de le faire, je souhaite dire que le français a un bel avenir, mais il nous appartient que cet avenir soit une réalité. Nos panélistes en débattront ce soir. Avant de laisser la parole à nos invités, je souhaite remercier tous nos sponsors, UCLA, le French and Francophone Studies Department, sont des partenaires fidèles de l'Alliance française de Los Angeles, le Consulat général de France, le Consulat d'Azerbaïdjan, Madame Toucouleur, pour votre participation au buffet, Wine of the World, Florence et Laurent Caraco, pour la boisson, pour le vin, et la Tropézienne pour les délicieux desserts. Je vous souhaite une excellente soirée.
Thank you very much for the consuls, my colleague consuls. I'm not going to call everyone because everybody's here. We're going to be having a panel, and we're going to be introducing ourselves. So thank you very much for coming, and it's a pleasure for me to have every one of you, different nationalities, coming here and joining hands to celebrate the Francophonie. Thank you very much for coming.
And now I'd like to introduce two videos from the Alliance Française.
The Alliance Française de Los Angeles is a language and cultural center. We have 1,000 students, 20 teachers, and we're a big community and we're having fun in French.
We sing, we play games, we do art and crafts. The children have lots of fun, we have fun with them, and they're learning at the same time.
We have wonderful workshops like Cine Club, Book Club, Sing Along. We even have yoga in French for kids and their parents.
We talk about food, travel, history of France. It's the closest you can get to the French culture.
It's a big community and everybody meets here not only for French classes but also to learn about the French culture. It's like being in a little France here in Los Angeles.
Nous organisons environ 50 événements par an, 50 à 60, et ça va donc du vernissage à la signature de livres, aux cours de cuisine, aux conférences scientifiques, aux conférences philosophiques. On n'est pas une école comme les autres, c'est-à-dire que vous venez apprendre le français, vous venez le pratiquer au travers de nos événements.
It's a smaller culture here in Los Angeles, but it's kind of a rich culture and I like being around it. L'Alliance française, c'est vraiment un moyen, le moyen unique pour essayer de comprendre qui on est.
On apprend le français and on s'amuse beaucoup. The teacher is very nice.
I went from being able to only say bonjour to having conversations in French. J'adore Alliance Française.
Teacher is very knowledgeable.
Everybody is welcome at the Alliance Française de Los Angeles. Bienvenue.
J'aime l'Alliance française. Je suis née en Europe, en France, en Océanie. Je suis née en Afrique et moi en Amérique. Je suis née en Asie. Nous sommes tous des enfants du monde, de pays différents. Mais nos mots et nos chants
I'd like to welcome Terry McCarthy. He's the President and CEO of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council, as our moderator, Los Angeles. Ambassador Lamia Mekmer, the Consul General of Egypt in Los Angeles. Alex Sparatu, President of the DEPT Group. Sorry? Close. Oh, sorry. And Karim Fabius, the Gallery Laquet. Is that right? The guy?
Good evening, everybody. Bonsoir tout le monde. Bonsoir. raison que nous faisons en anglais, c'est que c'est assez mal. Faire mal aux oreilles. So we're going to do this session in English, although I'm sure some people might drop in some French from time to time. For another reason, you're the representative of the French government here. Talk about the French government's plans for Francophonie, and particularly your president, who has, I believe, a big speech coming up, and there's grande ambition.
Thank you very much, Terry. I will start with thanking you again very warmly, Mme Toucouleur-Baye and Isabelle Owen, Guillaume Serena from the Alliance Française, because without them we won't be here tonight. So I would like to really thank them warmly. Starting question of Francophonie with the French government is a good way, not a good way. I mean, Francophonie is a concept that goes way beyond France, and it's something that has been developed over the years with all the countries that are French-speaking or francophile. But having said that, I guess you all know that we have a president in France that is full of ideas, and that there is no domain in which he doesn't have an idea to make things change. And Francophonie and the Français was one of the things that he decided maybe to improve or to get the Français being more widespread in the world. So he made a very big speech last September in favor of France, saying that he was opening a program called in French Mon Idée pour le Français, where everybody is invited till the 20th of March to give ideas about how to promote French, how to promote the teaching of French. And he will kind of gather everything, and he will, I think, make a big speech on Francophonie somewhere in April or May. So I think he has a plan, and I don't really know what's going to be in there, but I know that the point is to strengthen French and French speaking around the world.
I'm going to go to Kali at the very end. You were born in Port-au-Prince in Haiti. I've been there. That's a fascinating country because you live on the fringe of French, Creole, and of course there's an English component to it too. How is Francophonie, if I can ask you, how's that lived in Haiti, and how do you see that going?
Well, it's really interesting because I was just in Haiti just about a month ago on an art buying trip. We've had a Haitian art gallery in LA for 25 years called Gallery Lacaille. And it was interesting because I was on an art buying trip and there also for Carnival. And while we were in one of these slums where we sometimes go to meet with our artists who are very poor, several times I heard people referring to me when they hear me speak French to my husband or somebody else, they would say, "Oh, there's that blanc." Blanc, which means white, and so they meant a white person. And I just kept asking, "Well, what are you talking about?" And they would say, "But you are a blanc." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I think I'm offended. What are you talking about? They're talking. I don't look Asian." So it turned out, and they said, "But it turned out that a blanc is a foreigner to Haitians. Right? So they thought I was a foreigner because I guess maybe I don't dress or look or act like Haitians who live in Haiti. I've been living in the States too long. But it's an interesting thing because on some level, it just reminded me that speaking French, because we speak French and Creole in Haiti, they're both national languages, and it reminded me that even though Creole is a national language there, that French, it brings you up to another level. You're seen as somebody who has advanced on some level. And in fact, I was expressing that very point, impressing the point on the mother of a young girl in one of the slums that we were visiting, who we've taken under our wing and are paying for her education, that in Haiti, if you don't learn to speak French, you will not rise above your circumstances. And so, French remains a very important language in Haiti, even though, they understand French, but they'll respond to you in Creole.
That's so interesting because they pegged you as a foreigner because you spoke French, not Creole, but they understood it anyway.
Yes.
It's an interesting sort of double thing there. Alex, you originally from Romania, I think.
Yes.
But you do a lot of business in French.
Yes.
And you find that gives you a business advantage. I think you're the only businessman here tonight, so let's hear about that.
Does this work? No. Does this work? No, it's good. You have to flip the switch. First of all, I don't have any notes. And the reason I didn't take any notes is because I want to speak from the heart. Second one is I'm lazy. Now, what I do is an expression of my culture. And part of my culture is French. I grew up in Paris. I came here when I was 14. And I spend a lot of my time doing technology transfer between France, Canada, and the United States. It's not working? Put it in there. See, it's better. Sorry. Yeah. So, for instance, one of the first engagements that I had. Sorry. Try that. Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay, we're good. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, so one of the first engagements that I've had where I used my French was when I worked with Gaz de France in Paris, when we transferred some compressed current technology for protecting gas pipelines to Gaz Métro in Quebec, and then we brought that technology to Southern California. To make that happen, effectively the French language was essential to that transfer. It involved knowing how to negotiate with French, knowing how to negotiate with Canadians, and knowing how to negotiate with Americans. That's a cultural thing that comes only from the fact that you're actually able to speak the language. We're currently still doing the same thing with French technology from Bordeaux, which is, well, the point what I'm trying to make is, and one of the points I'm trying to make is that in France, there was scholastic, a school system that actually creates queen bees. France, unfortunately, doesn't have enough beehives for all these queen bees to be useful at. So what happens is some of these queen bees go to other places, okay? And I think of myself as one of those queen bees, okay? So, but I think that it's essential to speak French if you want to do business on an international level. That's really the point. And also knowing, understanding French culture helps you negotiate better. If you have the ability to speak French, you know your mind is plus souple. You have an advantage that someone who's born here just simply does not have. Anyway, I'm done.
Lamia, I love this panel and this whole collection of people who have so many different countries represented. It's very nice. Lamia, you are the Consul General of Egypt. Egypt has a long history with France. Some good, some more problematic. But tell me about the history of Francophonie in Egypt, what it means for you. You speak French. How is that? And tell us a bit about Francophonie in Egypt, please.
Do I speak French? No? Okay. Bonsoir tout le monde. I will switch to English. Francophonie in Egypt has a different meaning. Because in Egypt, we took it like a way of expressing our discontent, our combating to the British colonialism. And this is how, Egyptians looked at the French culture as the other culture, which is more, which is wider, that could accept everybody, that could, also cater to, the needs of the people in society. So it was another way of, approach to Francophonie. I don't think all countries had this, but it was a way of, combating the British colonialism. I am I'm part of this culture. I'm part of this because I went to the French school since I was a kid. I mean, 3 years. I'm from Alexandria, and this is another also sign of telling you how spread the French language was. It was the lingua franca in Egypt, actually, for a certain time. But Francophonie was also, because of the background I told you, it was also a way, an approach to life and a way of thinking. It was not only the language for us in Egypt. I remember very well, and I'll tell you a small story when I was at school studying l'œuvre de Eugène Ionesco, La Cantatrice Chauve, a play, a very famous play of Eugène Ionesco. And in this play, you know, the characters say a lot of words which have no meaning, like they pronounce the vowels a, e, u, or me, uni, ue, donc, onika, things that have no meaning. And I was a kid at the time, I mean, like, you know, 13, 14 years old, and I went to my professor and told him, he was, of course, obviously French, and I told him, I don't want to study this. This is ridiculous. It has no meaning. What does it mean exactly? And I remember very well. He looked at me and he said, I'll tell you something that you will think about it for all your life. Why does everything has to have a meaning? At the time I didn't really understand, but it grew with me. And this was my introduction to critical thinking, actually. Yeah. And yeah, so it is an approach to life.
I love that response. Why does everything have to have a meaning? I'll reserve that for future use. Thank you. I'd like to talk, you know, the idea of French culture and its particular appeal is sort of echoed through some of the comments here. I'd like to push that a little bit further. I'm curious, how many of you watch TV5 Monde? That's interesting. Let's go from the end. Can you tell me, how do you find that as a way of consuming, I guess, a French view on the world, or a French take on the world, which for many Americans is dominated by CNN and our sort of very, you know, centric view?
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. I love having it because I've never been a big fan of network news. I usually get my news from reading the New York Times or listening to NPR. I don't really watch much TV, but when I watch CNN and try to anyway, to me it's just not a lot of news. It's just a lot of talking, yakking, and a bunch of opinions back and forth, and you don't really get world news, and you only hear what's going on here in the States. While you take a half hour of TV5 Monde, and I'm amazed. You know, I'm hearing about what's happening in Africa, in France, in Canada, in Belgium, and here too. And they also cover American news because the U.S. is part of the world, and so it's more of a world view compared to the very egocentric view in America.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I used to work in American network news, and Africa does not exist for American network news. I mean, sorry, but you can't get money to go there. It's atrocious. Alex, French culture.
French culture.
How do you stay in touch?
How do I stay in touch? First of all, my wife is French. Two, French cinema has a sense of humor that is unequal in American cinema. Seriously, I mean, you're not going to compare the two. It has a completely different heart. It has a completely different soul. It touches you differently, okay? In spite of the value, okay? So, how you, it's French entertainment. When I fly KLM or Air France, the first thing I do, I catch up on French movies, okay? No. And the same thing with TV5. So it brings me back to my youth, okay? So that's important.
Because what we're talking about here is soft power. And that's been a strength of the United States with its culture, for better or worse. Baywatch forward. the Chinese have seen this, and they have been pushing the Confucian Institutes and so on, but they have a very heavy political component to that. Christophe, talk to me about French soft power and the fact that you have the most extraordinary chef here who made some of those pastries we ate tonight. Because that's soft power.
Yeah, well, it's about soft power, but I would just like, to say one thing more about TV5 Monde, what I think is really great with TV5 Monde is that it shows that speaking French opens to different culture. There's only in TV5 Monde that you can have a Canadian cooking emission where you learn how to cook Italian. Somebody with a Canadian accent. And I think it's the wonderful thing with TV5 Monde. It's just like it shows you people who share the same language, but who have different habits, different things that are different. And I think TV5 Monde is a real window open on the world, and I would just propose you to do one little exercise. You watch the same day the news that are broadcasted on TV5 Monde, so you will have the French news, the Swiss news, the Canadian news, the Belgian news, and you compare, and you'd be surprised, and relating back to what was said, is that this kind of diversity and this kind of things that are different. As far as soft power is concerned, I think there's food, but not only food. It's something that goes indeed through the language, and I think French is a wonderful language to carry culture, and while carrying culture, carrying values and carrying things. That's what was said, Alex, about the French cinema, but it's also the case for literature. It's also the case for, the French are very good at debating. Very, very good at that. We do that all the time. And we love it. And we love it. So it's just, I remember that we organized at the consulate last year something called La Nuit des Idées. And the whole thing was to introduce debates between, that was in English because we were in Los Angeles, but the Americans were fascinated by the format of it. This whole idea that you have two people, debating. And I think the soft power is something that is kind of complicated to control. I mean, it all depends on what you give and what other people are ready to receive. So I think we have soft power. I mean, TV5 Monde is one tool, but every country that belongs to the Organisation de la Francophonie promotes its own culture in French. So that's this whole gathering of efforts that are building a common soft power that are in French language.
So Lamia, you talked. Alex, you want to jump in there, please?
I want to mention one thing. I want to lancer des fleurs à l'Alliance Française. I want to compliment l'Alliance Française for something that l'Alliance Française has done that I thought was particularly well done. It's part of the soft power, it's French music, it's French songs. When you hear the classics, Americans love Edith Piaf, okay? Well, even to this day when I hear Edith Piaf, I have the frisson, okay? It's just what it is. And you had Django, and you had the Django-like music brought to l'Alliance Française. I have to tell you, fantastic. It's a kind of music, it's a kind of soft power that really makes an impact. Thank you for that.
Nice little shout out there. Lamia, we're talking here about soft power, we're talking about opening a different window on the world, this tolerance for diversity. That's particularly important in your part of the world, where intolerance in some countries has been growing. Talk a bit about how that works its way through in Egypt.
Yeah, well, very true. I mean, multilingualism in general prepares you to be a more tolerant, more open person when you know how other people think, how other people, act, live, and of course, language is, your tool to know. So, of course, French language was part of that in Egypt. It is also, we see it as, we still do, as a very important language to be always there in order just to disseminate these values. So, of course, this is a very important tool for tolerance and acceptance of that.
So I wanted to talk that through because I wanted to ask you one more question, Christophe, then open up to questions in the audience. Given the, I would say, very visual success of French soft power, how important is it, or is it helpful to have a more organized approach to Francophonie? Well, which I'm thinking of OIF, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. You have 57 members, they have these big conferences with these overarching themes. Is that actually helping, or does it get in the way?
I think we have to consider it as a whole system. The soft power is carried on a very local level by a lot of institutions. Alex mentioned the Alliance Française, the Institut Français, the Lycée Français, and the OIF is playing a different role. The OIF has specific missions, and the missions are in favor of French language, of course, but then OIF developed the whole programs in favor of democracy, human rights. I mean, there's a whole political aspect about OIF that goes way beyond the simple fact of speaking French, and I think this should be considered as a whole. It's a whole system. There are this organization, there are countries, there are also other, I'm thinking about Quebec, it's not a country, but it belongs fully to the Francophonie. And so it's a puzzle, and each piece has its own importance, and I think, you know, it works because everybody is committed and everybody is kind of pulling in the same direction.
The problem is that with 57 countries, you have very different levels of political development, of, frankly, respect for human rights. You end up having to kick people out, which has happened. By the way, not just OIF, the British Commonwealth has the same problems when people have coups. I'm just wondering whether, when you have those rigid requirements, whether that can be some of a hindrance, where you have some of the poorer countries saying, well, it's very fine for you in France to lecture us about democracy and human rights, but, you know, we haven't got there yet. Is that an issue?
I would tend to think that it's an asset, actually. An organization that gathers countries that are very different in their history, in their institutions, in the way they function, I think is an asset, and every country can learn from the other country, and I think it's an asset. I don't think it slows down, or it's really an asset. That's how you build something that will be a message that will be understood by many countries outside of Francophonie.
Yeah, and of course I agree with Christophe, but this is a multilateral effort. I mean, you have to, we are different, but we can reach compromises, and this is what happens in multilateral organizations. But you have to believe in what you do. You have to believe that you're building something in the air, just like the United Nations. There is no, you know, tangible or something material that you can touch, but you have to believe in what you are building, what you are spreading, the values you're spreading. And I mean, for instance, I mean, for the rights of women, for instance, I wouldn't say that it's the same since the United Nations has been established and today. The same thing for the Francophonie. You have to build, but you have to believe in the thinking.
Thank you. Who has questions from the floor? We're going to take some questions and then we're going to stop and have another. Questions for our current panel.
Christophe, you just said that one of the good things with Francophonie is to have different countries getting together and learning from each other. Somehow it doesn't seem like an American model. This country doesn't seem ever interested to learn from others because we're so exceptional here. So how possibly could the Francophonie help to, you know, break to the American armor and make them look around to see that, oh well, we may be the greatest country on earth, but that could be debatable as well.
Yeah, this is the question. I think it's No, I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, Francophonie is in the United States is also a reality. So there are Francophone people in the United States. You'd be surprised to know that the most Francophone state in the United States is Maine, actually. We couldn't figure it out, but also because it's close from Quebec, so I think that's the thing. So it has, you know, the Francophonie has also something to bring to the United States in terms of culture. Alex was talking about cinema. I mean, we have a film festival, le Festival du Film Francophone, and so there is something to bring to the United States. And I understand what you say. The United States, they have a very strong soft power. It's a country that is very well organized. But I think the voice of Francophonie is heard, and I think the voice of Francophonie is bringing that little thing more, ce petit quelque chose en plus, that I'm sure the Americans are appreciating.
Bonjour, Gavin Jones from the Canadian Consulate. Merci pour toutes vos interventions. I just wanted to add something and then perhaps ask our colleague from Haiti a question, but just to say that having lived in Francophone countries around the world, including in West Africa and Senegal, where Mam is from, I've seen the OIF work firsthand to support not just women and girls, not just development projects in the language of the countries in which are members of Francophonie, but especially on democracy. And that's something that hasn't really come up yet, is the support for democratic institutions, for elections, as observers, as helping members realize that they are not alone, that they get support from their neighbors, from their members of that same community, but also to hold them to account when those elections are fraught with irregularities. I've seen it work in Guinea, especially recently in the early 2010s, and I have to say, having seen it firsthand, it is an organization that is effective in bringing those things. Now, of course, there are different areas, particularly in women and girls, as you mentioned, that is a developing aspect of the Francophonie's work and a big priority for Canada, if I may say. But we're also very proud that we have a Canadian-Haitian woman as the head of the Francophonie right now. I wanted to ask you if you've have a view on a woman as head of the organization, and if there was rumblings of Michael Jean's fame when you were in Port-au-Prince recently.
Yes, of course, everybody knows Michael Jean, because what's interesting about Haiti is that even though there's so much illiteracy and education is scarce for people who can't afford it, and a huge sector of the population is illiterate and uneducated and very, very poor, somehow, unlike uneducated people here in the States, or even educated people here in the States, they know everything about what's happening on a day-to-day basis in their government. They are extremely engaged. They are extremely knowledgeable. They follow all the political talk. They know what's going on. They vote. They somehow, we always think that education is the bridge that helps people to engage in their community and in their environment, but not necessarily. And so they know, and they're very interested, and you can talk to the poorest person in Haiti, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what's going on, what movements are afoot. In fact, when we were there for Carnival, the ex-president, Michel Martelly, who the new president is a protege of his, and there's a big scandal right now going on, oil from Venezuela, money that disappeared and all that. And there are going to be protests soon. You know, you don't have to wait too long for the protests to happen in Haiti, just like in France. It doesn't take much to wake up in the streets. Yeah, that's part of my French history. And of course, I love that a woman is in charge, so of course.
Oui, bonsoir, je m'excuse, malheureusement, moi j'ai laissé mon anglais à la maison. Il n'était pas costaud déjà. j'ai du mal et je n'ai pas pu le prendre. Je me suis dit, je vais à l'Alliance française, c'est la journée de la francophonie et j'ai un très mauvais anglais. Je suis venue de très loin pour cet après-midi, je viens du Sénégal, invitée par Marc, qui m'a dit à la francophonie, j'ai dit chouette, parce que je représente la République en marche au Sénégal et puis je me suis dit, tiens, je vais pouvoir fièrement faire du direct et lui dire que le français, je l'ai trouvé à Los Angeles. Malheureusement, c'est raté. Je n'ai pas compris la moitié de ce qui s'est dit, pour la raison que j'avais évoquée avant. À savoir que l'anglais était mauvais, que je l'ai laissé à la maison. Donc je ne vais pas faire reprendre, je ne demande pas de traduction. Mais je reviens juste sur cette culture française, qui est mienne également. Je suis euro-africaine et franco-sénégalaise. Mes parents étaient nés français. À l'époque, on leur apprenait que les grands-parents étaient gaulois. Moi, j'ai appris dans la même langue qu'ils n'étaient pas gaulois. Mais toujours la même langue, ça a été utilisé. Je continue à apprendre à mes enfants qui ne sont pas gaulois, mais qu'eux sont français. Et je suis un peu frustrée quand même. J'ai absolument rien contre l'anglais, il faut que j'apprenne. Mais je m'attendais à ce qu'on s'exprime en français. Et j'ai fait du direct, je vous le dis tout de suite, par Facebook, parce que j'étais sûre qu'on allait s'exprimer en français. Et j'ai dit à tout le monde, je vous l'envoie en direct. Alors attendez-vous à ce que ça râle. Mais c'est avec fierté que je l'ai envoyé en direct. Et puis la prochaine fois, peut-être que vous ferez un effort. Voilà, merci.
Je vais répondre moi aussi en français parce que je pense que ce que vous dites est très important. La francophonie, c'est surtout parler français. C'est surtout parler français. Je ne sais pas si ça marche. Voilà, ça marche. Je ne sais pas si la francophonie, c'est surtout parler français. La francophonie, je pense que c'est aussi, et c'est peut-être la raison pour laquelle en fait la soirée s'est déroulée majoritairement en anglais. C'est aussi aller chercher des publics nouveaux, c'est aussi convaincre des gens nouveaux de l'intérêt de la francophonie, de la langue, de tout ce qu'il peut y avoir derrière, de toute la richesse des membres de l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie. Et il n'y a pas de meilleur moyen de convaincre un Américain que de parler en anglais. Donc je pense que effectivement, je comprends très bien votre point et je partage même un petit peu votre frustration, mais je pense que c'est important aussi de faire la promotion de la francophonie envers des personnes qui ne parlent pas français.
You want the translation in English?
Hello. So, I have a question. It's not necessarily it's for French-speaking countries across the globe. Americans have there are almost no American visitors to Seychelles, Maldives, many other places that are fabulous places to take a vacation, and I think Americans don't even know about the quality of these places, or they perceive them to be for movie stars and billionaires. So, which is not necessarily the case. So how could you address bringing more North American and U.S. visitors to some of these fabulous places that are not well known?
Comment on fait ça avec ça en anglais et en français? The way you expose beautiful places is through cinema, through film. What we buy, what we use, everything here in Hollywood. American materials has been promoted, enforced through cinema. You want to get these places that you all know? Get it on, starting documentaries, like super incentives to the folks want to make movies, telling them to get to these beautiful places. That's work. Say again. Absolutely. You know, it's use the vision, cinema. That's really the message. Unfortunately, we don't have that much music, but that'll work.
Follow up with that. Well, since I'm in the arts, I agree with you. In addition to film, I would say the arts because Haiti, although the new say I won't say it called what he called Haiti, but since well, Haiti can't be a shithole because we speak French. So so the way that we teach people about Haiti is through the arts because people don't know this about Haiti, relative to its size and output. We're one of the biggest sources for black art in the world, and when Americans, Europeans came to know about the art in Haiti, that's what started the first Renaissance in Haiti in the 40s. People flocked to Haiti. Then museum exhibitions in the Modern Museum of Art in Paris, all around the world started happening. And that profusion of art is still going on. It's still huge. And years ago, Travel and Leisure had Haiti as one of the 10 places must see. And a lot of times people ask me, is it safe? It's always safe to go to Haiti. It is. I mean, even in troubled times, it's always okay to go to Haiti. Suggestion.
My name is Laura. I'm a UCLA student. I have a question regarding soft power because it's part of my studies. I study political science, and I think before I ask the question, I feel like it's useful to give the context. I vote because I also study French as a minor, and I study Arabic as a minor, but the thing is, I went to Asia, and in Korea there are a lot of stores that have names with French, like Paris Baguette, etc. And there's a lot of Koreans who are very interested in the culture, and also like I study Arabic and political science. I study Middle East and how France and everything. And so I'm very much interested in soft power in particular, and because I see it in my studies, I see it in my experiences. So my question is, the term soft power started in the 90s, right? Well, it was coined by Joseph Nye. But I had a project in which I kind of said that soft power was not creation in the 90s. I think it's much more than that. And I think France, I think if you look at history, with soft power, I think it manifested itself much earlier than the 90s, like 1600s, Louis XIV, that type of thing. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think that soft power started like much more early in the 90s than what Joseph Nye would suggest?
There is that thing in a play of Molière where we say that Monsieur Jourdain faisait de la prose sans s'en apercevoir, and maybe we were doing soft power without even realizing it. It's true that, and especially it's especially true in the United States, where we have a kind of a common history. There is at the late 18th century, the two countries exchanged things, ideas, a certain perception of the way we should organize our politics and our regimes. So maybe it was a way of soft power, and maybe France, had a soft power sometimes against their will. When Marie Antoinette is so popular now around the world, where there are movies about Marie Antoinette, where everything is linked with. The Americans always linked her with macaron, which I never understood why, but that's what they do. Marie Antoinette was not particularly a very positive character for the French. So I think you're right. It's the soft power has to do with there's a word in French for that called le rayonnement, and I think it's really this. It's what a country brings to the outside. What kind of ideas, what kind of movies, what kind of gastronomy, a lot of things, and it belongs to and it can be anything. So I think you're right. We maybe were doing soft power before without knowing we were doing soft power.
Make this
Is there what type of discussions are happening right now about bringing French people to the U.S. to kind of influence the soft power and spread of French culture?
Okay, I'll give you a practical example. French power essentially comes from the empire building. It's a different technique of empire building. And the French went about it in a much more intelligent fashion than the Saxons, where they tried to win the hearts, the soul and hearts of the folks. That if you look at, for instance, the way American military behaves in places where it's involved versus the way the French behave, and the Legionnaire, which is one of getting themselves into the help mode rather than a non-help mode. I think that's a much more intelligent way of doing empire building. Okay, that's really what we're talking about. And one of the examples of where you use opportunities to expand French influence, at least in my opinion, okay, is where you bring French innovation, because France has a tremendous amount of innovating mind. And when you look at the number of technologies that we use today, and you see where they came from, it's amazingly surprising what percentage of that came out of the French minds. So, having been here at UCLA School of Engineering, some of my best professors were French professors. When I was very much surprised. And that still goes on. And so I'll give you a typical example. I'm working with a gentleman out of Bordeaux who was educated in France, who knew how to make special avionics equipment. And we ended up building a business together where we now get not only contracts here in California, but we're getting contracts in Puerto Rico and Chile. It's really the kind of global expansion where you bring French knowledge and you use that as a bridge for everything else that comes behind it. You got to have a position of strength before you can actually expand that in other areas. It's wonderful to bring the music, it's wonderful to bring the films, but you got to do the fundamental business, and which allows these people to have the resources to come here and share what they know and both. It's bi-directional. I really think that's it. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. So I'd like to call to a close the first panel, if we can give everyone a round of applause for